Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to rise and speak on behalf of the people of my riding. But, Mr. Speaker, it's 8:20 on a Thursday night, and I really don't want to be here, actually, Mr. Speaker. The reason I'm here is because of the mess that's being created in Union Bay in my riding. And, Mr. Speaker, we've got an outfit that is shipbreaking that isn't in a proper facility. It doesn't have a floating dry dock. It is not meeting international standards because we don't have them, Mr. Speaker, in Canada when it comes to shipbreaking. Where, in fact, we could be a leader, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to shipbreaking in our country, and the proper, responsible, shipbreaking and taking apart ships and recycling them properly. We don't do that. We've had a really incredible group of people that in our riding from that are taking on the role of government, really, because the government's lacking in providing regulations to protect them. But the concerned citizens of Bayne Sound who've been active on this, Marilyn Manning, Ray Newcastle, Ashley Gerlach, there's so many others, have been advocating, Mr. Speaker, for the government to stop the shipbreaking outfit because it is a threat to the sensitive ecosystem of Bayne Sound. Also, the Comox Valley Regional District has sought an injunction to stop them, Mr. Speaker. Daniel Arbour, the local area rep, who's phenomenal, has been working with international organizations trying to bring ideas to the government to fill the regulatory gaps that they have. The Comox Nation has asked for this to immediately stop. And, Mr. Speaker, the province of BC has an abatement order against this company. And we also just got a letter from Gliaman Nation, Mr. Speaker, asking that this outfit stop its activity. And they're on the other side, Mr. Speaker, of the Salish Sea. So there is no support, no social license in our region for this. And the federal government actually named Bayne Sound an ecologically and a biologically sensitive ecosystem back in 2012. And it cited it needed protection. This is absolutely a critical area when it comes to jobs. 50% of BC shellfish are actually produced there in this area, in my riding. And also, Mr. Speaker, it is the last herring spawning fishery on the whole coast of British Columbia. This is absolutely critical that we protect it. DFO is actually ignoring their own research and recommendations by allowing this hazardous polluting industry to continue doing what it's doing in Bayne Sound. And they're going against their own studies and recommendations. Again, there is no European ship recycling regulations, something I tabled a motion calling for, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to just read a quote from Check 6 News. They cited that, again, Deep Bay Water Recovery was taking apart derelict vessels in Union Bay and has been hit with a pollution abatement order from the province. The company is illegally allowing toxic effluent to run into the Bayne Sound and the marine environment, BC's Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy has found. Discharges from the shipbreaking operations are collected in sump pump pits, which occasionally overflow with untreated effluent. Testing of the runoff confirmed high concentrations of pollutants, including copper, iron, zinc, and cadmium. Mr. Speaker, a letter came out from Nathan Cullen, our former colleague here in the House, who's the Minister of Water, Land and Resource Stewardship, and George Heyman, the BC Minister of Environment. And they're calling on the government to take action. They said the province can't do this in isolation, and direct and immediate action and engagement is required by the federal government. And they also cited that, Mr. Speaker, that it's in a multi-jurisdictional framework such as this, it is critical that municipal, provincial, and federal agencies work together to ensure that the interests of the public, First Nations, and the environment are protected. But, Mr. Speaker, guess who's missing? The federal government. They've been missing in action while this is taking place.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Fisheries and the Canadian Coast Guard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government of Canada recognizes that safe recycling processes are vital to ensure the careful and secure handling of environmental hazardous substances such as asbestos, heavy metals, hydrocarbons, and ozone-depleting substances. Canada aims to ensure that ships are recycled safely at the end of their operational lives without posing unnecessary risks to human health and the environment. Ship recycling in Canada is recognized as the most environmentally sound method to dispose of ships that have reached their end of life. Many provisions affecting ship recycling facilities are governed by provinces and territories, such as environmental and waste management and workplace occupational health and safety, Mr. Speaker. Overall, Canada has some of the strongest laws and regulations across federal, provincial, territory, and municipal jurisdictions. And we remain committed to working with all levels of government to make sure Canada's ship recycling facilities remain among the safest in the world. The Canadian Coast Guard, Mr. Speaker, has received numerous inquiries about the vessels that are intended for deconstruction at the Deepwater Recovery Cycle in Union Bay. The Coast Guard has undertaken several assessments of the area where the vessels are awaiting deconstruction at Deepwater Recovery. If pollution enters the marine environment from a land-based spill, the Coast Guard will report the pollution to Emergency Management British Columbia and provide assistance where required. The Coast Guard has reminded the deconstruction company of its responsibility on the Canadian Shipping Act 2001 to prevent any release of oil or other pollutants from reaching the marine environment. Mr. Speaker, the Government of Canada is taking action to reduce the number of vessels of concern in Canadian waters and minimize their impact on coastal communities, the environment, and the public. Under the Oceans Protection Plan, as of January 2024, the Government of Canada has removed 584 wrecked, abandoned, or hazardous vessels across the country. The Wrecked, Abandoned, or Hazardous Vessels Act was adopted in 2018 and came into force in 2019. The objective of the Act are to strengthen owner accountability and enable more proactive government action to address the risks posed by problem vessels. Specifically, the Act increases marine safety by 1, prohibiting vessel abandonment unless unauthorized by law or in case of emergency or marine emergency. 2, prohibiting owners for allowing their vessels to become wrecks either by neglect or deliberate action. 3, prohibiting owners from leaving their vessels adrift in Canadian waters for more than 48 hours without taking action to secure them. And 4, prohibiting owners from leaving a dilapidated or poorly conditioned vessel in the same area for more than 60 days without consent. This prohibition is important since dilapidated vessels are at a greater risk of becoming abandoned or wrecked. Under the Wrecked, Abandoned, or Hazardous Vessels Act, an owner is prohibited from allowing their vessel to become a wreck due to failing to maintain it. Under the Canadian law, vessels owners are responsible for their vessels at all times. They must take all necessary action, including repair, salvage, and prevention of cleanup of leaking fuel or oil. Vessel owners must contact the Canadian Coast Guard if their vessel is sinking, has sunk, or threat to discharge marine pollution. When a report of pollution is received, Mr. Speaker, the Coast Guard begins the marine pollution response process by assessing the potential risk posed by that vessel. Some factors considered include the risk to human life, the risk to environment and public safety, as well as the type and size of vessel, location, and how much fuel is on board. In situations, Mr. Speaker, where a vessel is at high risk to release pollutants into the marine environment, the Coast Guard will work with response partners to the immediate action. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Courtenay-Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, they're tearing apart a boat in a sensitive fish habitat zone right now in Union Bay. Back to the letter from the province of British Columbia, they cited direct and immediate action and engagement is required by the federal government as it relates to potential discharge to the marine environment, protection of marine habitat, and the transportation of vessels to the site. In particular, measures must be implemented to ensure that ships are not transported to facilities that lack the capability to handle them properly and safely. And they call for immediate action from the federal government. This letter was written in February, Mr. Speaker. We're in May. The Sliammon, they're alarmed by the potential environmental impacts of this operation, the lack of regulatory oversight that allows its placement in an ecologically sensitive area, and they were not consulted on any permitting related to this operation. I'll be giving this letter, Mr. Speaker, to the Parliamentary Secretary after this debate. But it's time, Mr. Speaker, for the federal government to act. I haven't seen anything like this in almost 9 years as a member of Parliament. It's absolutely shameful.
Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member opposite for the question. Ship recycling is a complex multinational industry, Mr. Speaker. It has been a growing area of focus for the International Marine Organization, which has been working over the course of the last 2 decades to support safe and environmentally sound ship recycling worldwide, Mr. Speaker. And Canada maintains some of the strongest rules for global ship recycling. As a member of state to the International Maritime Organization, Canada has contributed to the work and the important work to improve ship recycling practices worldwide. As the government has stated before, many of the legislative provisions that govern safe and environmentally responsible ship recycling fall under provincial jurisdiction. We are committed to working with the provinces and territories to ensure we have the safest recycling facilities in the world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.